Well, quite recently, a former head of state of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, retired Major General Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida, launched a book. Well, his memoir, A Journey in Service, was launched in Abuja among dignitaries and political bigwigs. Interestingly, he mentioned that the annulment of the MKO Abiola election, June 12th election, was one of the most difficult things he had to do in service. Well, joining us this morning to have more perspective into this discussion is Olalekan Ige. He's a journalist and a public affairs analyst. Good morning, Olalekan. Can you hear me clearly?
Yeah, good morning. I can hear you clearly.
Great. Now, the man IBB, who was christened as the evil genius, at 80, pulling a lot of weight. In his book, he made mention of so many things, which we're still going to go into in the course of the interview. But how would you describe the man IBB in terms of his person, his policies, and his government?
Well, I would rather say difficult, really, to describe him. Remember, he was popularly referred to then as Maradona. Maradona because he had dribbled Nigerians a lot. He kept shifting the transition, to civilian government all through from 1990 to 1993. I would rather say very difficult, to describe his government. Very difficult, really, for me.
All right, so you could see him at 80 writing a memoir, detailing some of the experiences he had in service. Quite recently, the book was launched in Abuja. And then the critical aspect, among others, was the case of the annulment of the June 12th election. Do you see it as a man who has come of age and wants to free his conscience of any evil doing? What is your assessment of that book, him writing it at this time, at this point in his life? What impact do you think that book will bring to the Nigerian state and, of course, to the grieving families, that were mentioned in the book?
Well, let me say there is nothing new in what, especially as regarding who won the June 12, 1993 presidential election. Babangida didn't say anything new. Every Nigerian of voting age in 1993 knew MQ Abiola won that election. So he didn't tell Nigerians anything new. There was nothing new in saying that he admitted that Abiola actually won that election. I think there is just a loss of power supply. Okay, sorry. There's nothing new in what he said about that June 12, 1993 presidential election. What is new is that he's not telling Nigerians that he was not aware that election was annulled. He's not telling Nigerians that it was the second in command, late Augustus Aikomu, was the one who annulled that election, and it was not to his knowledge. I think that's the only new thing Nigeria now hearing, because for those of us that were quite active then in 1993, and for a lot of Nigerians who knew Babangida then, Babangida told all of us that he was not only in power, he was in government. So I'm shocked, I'm surprised that Babangida is not telling us that there were a lot of powerful people in his administration that couldn't control. He's just mentioned one of them, Augustus Aikomo. He's just mentioned even probably the most significant of them, or Sani Abacha. Babangida has not admitted to us now that he couldn't control Sani Abacha, or he was rather afraid of Sani Abacha. And that is new because if you watch the events that dovetailed into the annulment of June 12 and the aftermath of setting up an interim national government, then you begin to wonder, is Babangida really telling Nigerians all of the truth, of that period? And that's what is significant, to a lot of Nigerians, that Babangida is now admitting that he was actually not completely in charge of his administration.
All right, let's just go down memory lane to try to pick up some of the things that happened and try to align it with what, like you said, Baba told us in his memoir. Now, we could recall that after June 12, 1993, IBB actually stepped aside by August and gave way to an interim government. What are your thoughts? Don't you think that's the action of a man who probably wants to assuage, for his actions or inactions, for him to have, stepped aside months after the annulment? Don't you think is the action of a man whose conscience was probably biting? And then the issue of Sani Abacha, the fact that Sani Abacha, after the interim government led a bloodless coup and came into power by November of the same year. Don't you think it actually aligns with what IBB was saying? I just want to hear your perspective on this.
No, I think you needed to have a background to this. Remember that before we had the June 12, 1993 presidential election, we had series of a lot of postponements and all of that, from Babangida. We're supposed to have transitioned as a 1990. It was the one who shifted it again by another year. It was the one who shifted it again. Then he shifted it the third time. Remember that before the 1993 presidential election, there were actually primaries of both the NRC and the SDP that were cancelled outrightly for whatever reasons Babangida must have stated as at then, before we now went to another round of primaries for both NRC and SDP. NRC had their convention in Port Harcourt, where Tofa emerged as the candidate of the NRC, while the SDP had their convention in Jos. One of the most hotly contested primaries in the history of political parties in Nigeria, before Abiola emerged winner in Jos. The difference between Abiola and Babagana Kingibe at that Jos presidential primary, I think, was less than 10 votes. That's the difference between Abiola and Babagana Kingibe. So it gave you an idea of what must have happened all through before we arrived at the presidential election on June 12, 1993. Babangida admitted, in his book, that there were a lot of security reports. There were a lot of issues about the conduct of that presidential primaries of the political parties, the issue of money being used to buy voters and all of that. Babangida admitted that he got security reports. He had all of this. Even at that, he said he was determined, according to him, to conduct the election. We went to the election. I'm shocked that Babangida is not telling us now that the election was fraught with a lot of rigging and all of that. This is news to a lot of Nigerians. All of us who went out to vote in 1993, there was absolutely nothing like rigging. So far, who was from Kano, lost the election in Kano, and there was no outrage in Kano. It gives you an idea of how free, fair, and credible June 12, 1993 election was. So far lost, and he didn't even complain that he lost in Kano, in his home state. So everything went smoothly. Nigerians wanted to hear the election. Remember too that before that election, Association for Better Nigeria, led by the late Francis Aton Zeribe, had gone to court, had suddenly got a crooked judgment overnight, stopping the election from holding. They had to go to another round of meeting before the Security Council then said, okay, look, we just have to go ahead, with this election. They went ahead with the election. Results have started trickling in. A lot of us had our results from almost all of the respective states. We went to that, and late Professor Humphrey Nwosu, chairman of the National Electoral Commission, had started announcing results until we got a different thing that the result will no longer be announced. They needed to find out what was going on before we now heard about the annulment of the June 12, 1993 presidential election. Because of pressure, enormous pressure from Nigerians and the angst, across the land. I think Babangida felt the pressure, not because he wanted to go. The pressure was just too enormous at that particular time. And he now said he was going to step aside. He said he was going to, he handed over to ODA. Please, loss of power supply from my end there. I'm sure the power supply will soon come up a little bit, please. Okay, please, just hold on. Let them find an alternative to power, probably, please. Let me just take 2 minutes break, please.
All right, so you've mentioned that June 12th was probably 1993 elections was probably the most credible elections in the history of Nigerian democracy, and it was in IBB's administration that this was able to be achieved. Now, in his memoir, he stated influences and mentioned a couple of names like General Sani Abacha, Augustus Aikomu, and the rest. But did he make any mention of foreign influences, Western influences on June 12th annulment, their roles probably on the annulment of the June 12, 1993 elections?
There was nothing like a Western influence in 1993. Remember that even the Western world had wanted democracy to return to Nigeria. Nigerians were eager, and that's why I said, look, for a lot of time, Babangida shifted the goalpost. We're going to have election. Initially, we had the political parties that were registered. Babangida on his own woke up on the morning and proscribed all the political parties that were registered. He was the one who brought up the idea of a two-party system for Nigeria, that of SDP and NRC. It's important to note that that same administration built party secretariats of both SDP and NRC across all of the local government and state capitals that were in Nigeria, as at that point in time. And so Nigerians were in a hurry to see the end of the military junta. So they agreed to all what he did at that point in time. Everybody queued behind SDP and NRC. There was nothing like Western influence. If you talk of Western influence, then you could say, look, the Western influence wanted democracy to return to Nigeria, not just to Nigeria, to much part of Africa that were under military dictatorship at that point in time. And unfortunately, Babangida is now giving us names of people who unfortunately are no longer alive. This is what is amusing in all of this. He waited for all of 32 years, to make this memoir, public to Nigerians. Ayomo is no longer alive. Abacha is no longer alive. Professor Ofre Nwosu, who was the chairman of the National Electoral Commission, is not alive. Francis Aton Zeribe is not alive. Justice Ipebe, who gave that judgment stopping June 12, 1993 presidential election, is no longer alive. All of the major actors, the late Don Kabali, powerful people in Babangida's administration at that time, is no longer alive. So you wonder that he's accusing a lot of people, in his books of being behind some of his decisions. Unfortunately, these people are no longer alive to state, their own side of the story. There was one Colonel Kangi, I think Colonel Shehu Kangiwa is still alive. I'm sure he might be able to give us a lot of insights as to what happened, around that period. But unfortunately, the major actors that Babangida is now accusing, are no longer alive. And it's sad. It's put down what, for me, I consider to be half-truths outrightly. All of us who were part of June 12, 1993 election, we rather say, no, this is news that Babangida is telling you. There was at a funeral in Katsina, and it was while he was in Katsina that the late Augustus Aikomu, wrote a release on a piece of paper annulling, June 12, 1993 election. If you know the history of military junta in Nigeria, you know that there's absolutely no way Augustus Aikomu would have released such a statement without clearing for Babangida. It was absolutely impossible at that point, in time. And when Babangida stepped aside, he brought in the late Ernest Shonekon. You see, these actors are no longer alive. He brought in the late Ernest Shonekon to be the head of the interim, national government. Why did he leave Abacha behind? If Abacha was a problem, if he was afraid of Abacha, why didn't he retire Abacha before he left government? He kept Abacha there to supervise over Ernest Shonekon. Of course, all Nigerians at that point in time knew that Abacha was only bidding his time to take over government. I think it was more of like a turn by turn. I've done my own 8 years, 1985 to 1993. Abacha, just wait. Let's use the Shonekon to pacify the West, particularly the Southwest at that point in time, who were pretty angry that their son had been denied the chance to become Nigeria's president. Babangida has also come out to say that, look, I saw the idea of MK Abiola. I saw the idea to MK Abiola for him to head the interim national government. Can you imagine? For Abiola to come and head the interim national government when Abiola himself knew that Abacha was still around the corner. So with the benefit of hindsight, assuming that Abiola had accepted to be the head of interim national government, that is how he will have sold his mandate away, and that is how Abacha will have taken over, and it will have killed any of agitation Abiola will have had over the presidency of the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
All right, another issue that came to bear during the launch of this book was the issue of the late Delegiwa, the investigative journalist. But before we get there, I want you to speak to a particular notion. Well, for you, you say IBB has brought forward half-truths. Well, according to some of the news highlights we had today, according to Falaye and Agbakoba and co, they say his stance is belated. And of course, Abacha's daughter also made mention of the book and said God doesn't sleep, in a cryptic post. What are your thoughts to these, submissions by these people before we get into the Delegiwa issue?
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm not shocked that the statements of Ulisa Bakoba, he was a member of the Civil Liberties Organization, during the military junta. They were at the neck, of the military junta at that time, to quit office and allow popular democracy to take root in Nigeria. Olufalaye, yes, was part of those people that wanted, to contest election then under the various political parties that were registered until Babangida, proscribed them. I agree completely, with their submission that the what Babangida is saying now is completely belated. I wonder why he had to release it at this time. I think it's also good that he has released it. At least a lot of Nigerians now know so many things that Babangida did, and is now saying, "Look, I wasn't aware." But I will accept, responsibility. To me, that's a self-exoneration. No, it cannot be the complainer, the judge, and the investigator in his own matter. That is exactly what he has tried to do in this book. Is the complainant, is the investigator, is the judge, is the jury. No, there is no way to work. And that's why a lot of Nigerians in the coming days will be outraged. As many more people read this book, especially those who were well aware of the shenanigans that happened in 1993, will know that there are a lot of things that doesn't just seem right in this book. There are a whole lot of questions, for Babangida to answer. Remember, we had the oil windfall during the Middle East war between Iran and Iraq. There was a windfall. Nigeria made huge, amounts of money. What happened? We had the structural adjustment program. What happened to SAP? Why did it fail? Did it fail? A whole lot of things. We had the Mamman Vatsta coup. Did Vasta plan the coup? Truly, he was accused then of harboring the thought to plot coup to overthrow the administration. A whole lot, that Babangida will probably have to, if possible, do a second edition of this memoir, so that now, knowing that Nigerians are actually not happy, majority of people who were active then are not happy with his memoirs. Probably he could find some correction in a second edition.
All right, so let's talk about Delegiwa, the investigative journalist who was murdered using a letter bomb. What was IBB's submission to the man's demise? Because you've also alluded to the fact that he's saying half-truths, but what was his story, trying to, tell us exactly how or the circumstances surrounding the murder of Delegiwa?
Well, there were issues surrounding a certain woman, Gloria Okon. She was alleged to be working for the wife of Babangida, now late Miriam, Babangida. There were insinuations that then that she was a courier, sort of, for the late Miriam Babangida. And Delegiwa was onto that investigation. Apparently, the security apparatchik at that point in time knew what Delegiwa was on, and the general belief was that he was killed because he was onto something big and had almost concluded, that investigation to publish in the then News Watch, and because of that, he was killed via a letter bomb. The Babangida administration, Babangida particularly, said he never knew about what Delegiwa was investigating. It was not behind his killing. It does not know what led to his killing. But I'm sure a reasonable number of Nigerians, discerning Nigerians at that point in time, didn't believe him. Whether he was responsible or not, it's still doubtful, as of today. But then a lot of Nigerians, didn't believe him at that point in time. And there were accusations, going the way of the then Colonel Alilu Akilu and Tunde Akogun, who are the heads of the Directorate of the Military Intelligence, and I think the National Intelligence Agency. There were accusations, towards them that they were the ones responsible, for the killing of Delegiwa and all of that. A whole lot of investigations started, but didn't lead to any. So whoever killed Delegiwa remains a mystery as of today. But these were the allegations as at that point in time as to what led to the killing of Delegiwa, and why a lot of Nigerians believe that his death is linked to the military junta at that point in time.
All right, so is it right to say that IBB outrightly denied the killing or involvement in the killing of Delegiwa?
There were allegations against him, and we can only limit to the point of allegations. If you don't have the hard fact to link Babangida to the killing of Delegiwa, then it's difficult to pin that on him. Because if I say, oh, he killed him, then the next thing you're asking, where is the evidence? I don't have the evidence. He who alleges, must prove. I only said about what was the general opinion, of discerning Nigerians as at that point in time, that look, there is no way a letter bomb could have killed somebody, in Nigeria. Strange at that point, and it has never happened since then that somebody was killed via a letter bomb. It means that it's something that was well orchestrated, something that was well oiled, something that must have brought in by an expert, something that must have been timed to the point that Delegiwa will open the letter and it will explode in his face. Remember that when Delegiwa died, he had I think he had a Kayode Soyinka with him, at that point in time, but they were sitting across the table, having a breakfast when the letter bomb was delivered, and when Delegiwa opened it, he killed him, almost instantly. So I would rather say there were allegations against Babangida's administration over the killing of Delegiwa.
Now, at this point, would it also be right to say that there were some Western influences, of course, on the government of IBB? Because like you rightly said, there's not been such event previously or afterwards when the letter bomb killed Delegiwa. Would you say that there are Western footprints, in the murder of Delegiwa?
Well, if you are trying to look for this theory, difficult to say this point in time. One of the greatest ways to solve a crime is to establish a motive. So if we are trying to let's just think that there's Western influence, then the next obvious question to ask, if you want to accuse Western influences, is to say, what is the motive if they were to kill Delegiwa? Because that's the first thing you want to solve in a crime. What is the motive? What motivated this to happen? Once you solve a motive, then I think you've solved 85% of any crime. So if you want to hazard the guess and say, look, okay, let's even believe that Western influence, was behind this. What did they stand to achieve? What did they stand to gain? Was Delegiwa a problem to them? The answer is no. Except we are now saying, look, in view of the allegations at that period that a certain Gloria Okon was working for the late Miriam, Babangida, that they were involved in certain kind of criminal activities, except we are now trying to further the guests to say, look, maybe those who were working with allegedly, maybe those who were working with Miriam Babangida may have sponsored this from outside of Nigeria to ensure that Delegiwa never got onto the end of that story. Just maybe in terms of Western influence, in terms of a recognized government in the Western world, so much that. But if the allegations are true that certain networks, were working with the then late Miriam Babangida, then you could have said that probably they are the ones who are behind it. But such a thing could not have happened, without the knowledge of an internal person. It has to be something that is well coordinated to ensure that it was home at that point in time, to ensure that he was the one who was going to open it and nobody else. A whole lot must have gone on for such a letter bomb to be delivered. And for the letter bomb to be delivered, it means it must have been well wired to the point that once you open, it explodes. It needed some kind of expertise. And I don't think we had such of a local expertise at that point in time. Maybe that was manufactured from outside of the country or manufactured in country with the right materials put together and then delivered to the late Delegiwa. These are all guesses, really. Nobody's sure of this, like I've said earlier.
All right, Olalekan, in IBB's response to the issue of Delegiwa, he did mention that the death or the killing of Delegiwa was targeted at his government. Do you think it was a direct threat or direct target, on his government? What are your thoughts?
It's difficult, really. It's difficult. Is this a self-defense too on the part of Babangida? The way he's saying that Delegiwa's death was targeted at his government. What if it was his government too that targeted it against the rest of Nigerians, particularly the media sector? What if he too was also targeting the media sector to use that to shut up the media in Nigeria? So it's a two-way thing. He's just made this a statement. Well, he's within his right to make that statement. What if he too was the one targeting the media sector in Nigeria to shut us up and make sure that we were never able to criticize his administration, or we were never able to investigate some of the things that went on in his government? It's a two-way thing, really. I must tell you, it's a two-way thing. If he says the killing of Delegiwa was targeted as its administration, Babangida is not saying this on the basis of any evidence whatsoever. After all, he didn't adduce any evidence to that, in his book. I wish he had given us, an incontrovertible evidence, something that is as a result of a conclusive investigation by the Directorate of the Military Intelligence and by the Nigerian Intelligence Agency. I wish it was as a result of this investigation that Babangida made that statement. However, if he says so, that it was targeted at his government, what if he was also the one targeting the media sector in Nigeria?
All right, thank you so much, Olalekan Ige, for your insights. You've been very helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Save Nature TV. News in your pocket.